Hello and welcome to Chat GCP, a medical science, clinical research and commercialization podcast, and I'm your host, Charles Beasley. On today's episode, we have Dr. Diana Siew, the Strategic Partnerships Lead at the Auckland Bioengineering Institute out of University of Auckland. Welcome to the podcast, Diana.
Thanks, Charles. Lovely to be here.
So, maybe we can set our cards straight, but for me, I'm not quite sure what it means by a Strategic Partnerships Lead. It's a lovely title, a lot of syllables, but can you maybe take us through what that means? So just give a nice little overview of who you are.
It's a huge title, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, actually, so it actually tries to describe what I do, which is around strategy. And the other part of it is around developing relationships and partnerships. So we kind of put it together, and it's Strategic Partnerships Lead.
That's fantastic.
It kind of describes my position at the Auckland Bioengineering Institute, or ABI as we fondly know it. And it's really around I manage and co-lead many of the national initiatives that ABI hosts on behalf of a national consortium. Mm-hmm. And so it really, I guess, describes the totality of it.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say that you have fingers in many pies?
Yes.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So the overarching aim of the ABI and these consortia are really to build the profile of the MedTech industry in New Zealand, provide a bit of networking support, grab in other parts of the industry, connectivity, that kind of thing. What else am I missing?
Yeah, okay. So maybe I should start from the beginning.
Please.
Right? Okay. So my background, I'm actually a chemist by training, as a physical chemist, not one in the pharmacy. And over the years, I started my life at Industrial Research Limited. And at some point or the other, 12 years ago, my team then decided that we wanted to look at a future in medical technologies. Mm-hmm. And so they sent me to the ABI to meet up with Professor Peter Hunter, who is the founding director of the ABI. He's really he's really well known in his work in computational physiology. And if you wanted to be in MedTech research, then that's what we had decided, that we need to be friends with Peter. And Peter was really nice enough to invite us in, and from there, he and I started collaborating in research projects, but then we identified that there was actually a gap in the whole system. 12 years ago, there was only about 50 MedTech companies that were homegrown, and there was no connection from the universities to industry, and multinationals were just bypassing us. They were just going straight to Australia. And conversations with a couple of them actually indicated that it was just too hard to come into New Zealand. There was no one place that they could find anything. And the other thing is that they had to go shopping around the universities. And so the experience they have will be very different depending on who they met as well. So Peter and I identified the gap, and we co-founded the Consortium for Medical Device Technologies. And that's a partnership of University of Auckland, Canterbury, AUT, Victoria University of Wellington, Otago, and at that time, Industrial Research, and now Callaghan Innovation. Right. So more recently, we've also had Te Whatu Ora as partners into the CMDT, so bringing the science and the clinical parts together. Yes. So anyway, the CMDT started off as an industry research network, really just to connect and ensure that our research was out in the open, or actually having a space for research to be heard. And then we started looking at gaps in the system and what we could fill. And so I would call it an intervention at this stage. But a couple of years later, Peter Hunter decided that we should all bid in for a Tertiary Education Commission Centre of Research Excellence funding. Mm-hmm. And so that actually started the MedTech Centre of Research Excellence, which is the first intervention that the CMDT actually supported. And that really started the whole thing going around identifying gaps, what's the strategy, and research translation is the space that we occupy. Sorry, that was a bit of a ramble, wasn't it?
No, that's fantastic. I mean, I'm just blown away by how much you do, and looking through your CV, it's just mind-boggling, and how important your role is in translating research into commercial, actual, actionable things, technologies, which is fantastic. So yeah, I mean, so I suppose it's about providing a framework that's consistent across the country, because we don't want universities reinventing the wheel when they can all approach a similar framework. Yeah. But also having other industries tied in. So you mentioned Te Whare, so the health system is being tied in. You've got Callaghan, which has been tied in, so that's like a funding mechanism, and also a lot of collaboration and networking as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, part of why we started the CMDT was because, at that point in time, everybody was very siloed. And so there's only so much research money around as well. And so you'd find that someone in Auckland was working on a particular project, which was replicated in Wellington and replicated in Otago. And everyone was just in their little world, happy, but nothing was happening. So what we've developed, I guess, over the last 12 years is a platform where anybody that wanted to play in that MedTech research space, really the translation space, is welcome. And we would, we support with the researchers with capability building and also very early seed funding. So we're part of the big chain that straddles public research and the first part of the pre-seed accelerator fund that's run out of the universities.
Right. So it's almost like a one-stop shop.
We try. So I guess what we're trying to do is that we understand that, public research is funded by taxpayers. And so you've got two choices, right? You either take it and you use it and generate growth for New Zealand, or it just sits on the shelf. And so I think, we think that in the MedTech space, there's real opportunity here to suck up all that research that's been done and take it in and put it into the hands of people like you and I and our clinicians to use.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much value that is created, but then if it's not translated from the research setting into the commercial setting, then it just sits idle or is lost. So it might be interesting. And to our friends that do the academic research, I mean, they might be happy with just, that's really interesting, move on to the next thing. But we need to translate that into actual health value or commercial value, both for our populace, our economy, and the wider world, right? I mean, there's just too much at stake to just let it just stay in the public research.
Yeah, exactly, totally. And that's the premise of what the CMDT has become, and all the interventions. I call it interventions, but there might be another word for it. All the interventions that we have developed over time, strategic interventions, where it's really, taking research into the commercial space or the application space is not easy either. It's actually quite daunting, and I think that with some of your previous guests, you'd have heard them saying this. But part of it is providing opportunities to upskill our researchers and clinicians, whoever wants to play. And the second thing is actually building capacity. So there's no point having 20 people across the country. You need 2,000. You need more than that in actual fact. And then the other part is actually, and I think we talked about this earlier, is about developing quality pipeline for the future. New Zealand's too small. We need that quality to attract other players into our ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like we can't because of our size, we can't afford to have good money going after bad ideas. Yeah. Or
you try and weed out as many of the bad ideas as possible.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe just to frame everything, are there any really good examples that you can share about success stories out of this framework? I mean, I think there's a couple, as you mentioned, we had a couple guests from Elementary, and they've been part of the ABI, the whole pathway as well. Kitea Health?
Kitea Health, yes.
Yeah,
so Kitea Health is into implantable pressure sensors. And the first thing that they're working on is actually a pressure sensor for the brain, to release pressure buildup from, and sorry, I've forgotten the actual condition of it.
Yeah.
But in any case, the implantables, so the implantable sensor group that this work came out from, has been is one of the main groups out of the ABI, and the research that has supported Kitea, if you like, is actually it wasn't finished in a year. This has taken 10 years.
Right.
So a lot of the work that they've done, the platform of pressure sensors, that's applied in many other areas as well, including slightly different, but JunoFem, which is a new which is a startup that spun out of ABI as well, looking at pelvic floor muscle health.
Okay.
Yeah, so quite different, but it came out of the same group. It came out of similar concepts, just different applications.
It's absolutely incredible. And I spoke with Greg from Millimetry, and we kind of discussed how you need to be able to see that there is something that you can do in order to be able to. If you can see it, then you can try to do it. But if there isn't this framework, if there isn't that support there, if there isn't like a logical career progression, or if there isn't a logical career in like medical technologies, then you're not going to go down that route. So it's almost like you need to reach almost like a critical mass of people, capability, money, research to make such a high value industry a real thing in this country.
Yeah,
is that fair?
And that's extremely fair. And you've got, so at this point in time, you can tell that I'm a MedTech geek. But as I said to you 12 years ago when we started the CMDT, there were about 40 to 60 companies, and digital health was not a thing.
Right.
So that was about medical devices, and it was about health IT. So fast forward now today, we last count 300 plus companies, devices, digital health is now a thing, and there's health IT as well. So out of this 300 companies, you've got those that have spun out of the private sector and those that are coming out of the public sector, which is the universities, NCRIs. And I guess, where we are in that research translation space, we're trying to develop a MedTech sector that actually has got depth in terms of competition. I'm not saying that our private sector doesn't. They do. But we're trying to develop a deep tech industry as well, supporting what the private sector has done.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what we need to ensure that our companies can scale. That's the other thing about our MedTech sector. We have got, probably 80% of our companies are currently in the pre-revenue to about 5 million 5 million stage. So there's a lot of them that is at this place where they need to actually grow and scale. Yep. And the ones that have come out of the university have been fantastic because you've seen that with this intervention they've been able to accelerate. And I'm really excited to see their trajectories in the next 5 years.
Yeah,
I wouldn't even give them 10 because the oldest is 2016. Yeah.
Wow.
We started in So we started our little experiment in 2016. So if you think about the very first companies, that's Formus Labs with their orthopedic surgical management platform. They've really gone gangbusters. You've got the Insights company, about that age, and Millimetry is a little bit younger, and Kitea Health is one of our newest ones.
Yeah.
So, and they're all attracting investment funding, really good valuations, and actually, I'd say 4 or 5 of them are actually exporting as well.
That's fantastic. And I often say that New Zealand is a little island nation at the bottom of the South Pacific, and we're heavily reliant on tourism. We found that out the hard way during COVID. Also, primary industries is a big part of our GDP. But in order to maintain our place as a first world country, we need high value industries to be here. I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, we can there's only so many cows that we can raise, there's only so many sheep that we can raise, there's only so many people that are willing to travel down to New Zealand, to have a trip. But if we can have these high value industries in New Zealand and export that to the rest of the world, how much better off would we be? One of our guests mentioned that she thought that New Zealand had a chance of being almost like a Silicon Valley of the South Pacific for medical devices in New Zealand. And do you think that's accurate?
Yep. I think that's totally accurate. I think that's what we can do. With a little experiment in the MedTech core years, which is between 2016 and 2021, we had a small pot of funding, about 600K per year, okay, that we had focused onto a pilot program where we were trying to grow a quality pipeline, and that was our little seed fund, and so over the course of that 7 years, that was 3.3 million all in all. The companies we spun out 20 companies out of that. I think we funded about 60 projects.
Wow. Okay,
20 companies, and out of the 20, 5 are no longer active. And out of that, there's 11 that's scaling, okay, a Liberty, the Insights company, etc. And out of the 11 that's scaling, the combined valuation is 220 million, which is fantastic return, right? Yeah. And together, they've created about 200 plus jobs into the economy.
Yeah. So, in that short space of time.
In that short space of time, So you can see that, yes, what I think you mentioned, you probably, your guess is extremely right. We can do this. What we need is for the momentum to continue. Yeah. And that's kind of what happened when the MedTech core was completed. We had a little bit of a gap before we got our next tranche of funding. And this time the seeding fund is 2.7 million a year, so it's much bigger.
Wow.
And but we had COVID years in between.
Yeah.
And so we're actually starting the pipeline from scratch again. Which is a little bit heartbreaking. But hey, I think that it's taken about a year to get people up and running again. And we have RFPs going out every twice a year. This year it's 3 times, and the next one is coming up. And I've heard of, I know of a couple of really good projects that are coming through. So hey, I'm excited.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
So out of the 20, just going back, you said that there are 20 companies in that initial tranche. 5 are no longer operating. 11 are scaling. So another 4 that are
pivoting.
Pivoting. Okay. Yeah. So they're on that inflection point.
Yeah. I would say that they're trying to. I guess pivoting is one word, but the other word would be, I think they're trying to find their feet still. Yeah. And that's fine, But I think the success rate is really pretty good so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, isn't the classic like venture capital case 1 in 10?
Yep.
You expect to be successful. So if we say 11 out of 20 in less than 10 years, 8 years, 7 years, that's remarkable.
It is.
So it's really, so clearly there is a screen that is screening out all the lower quality ideas, and you just got the funding is going after good ideas exclusively, because that percentage is off the charts.
Yeah. So our screening process is actually pretty rigorous. So we have, and there's actually various levels as well. But essentially, the researchers. So you've got academic researchers. You've got the, in the first instance, the technology transfer office, commercialization experts. And then we have our advisory board, which has got expertise in investment, regulatory, clinical, and a deep understanding of the health system and health system needs, not necessarily just in New Zealand, but also from overseas. So, it's actually pretty rigorous. Yeah. But one of the things that we also do in our process is that if you don't get funded, we actually give you heaps of feedback. I'm not sure whether you want it sometimes, but we try and support you so that you can actually develop your ideas up for further opportunities.
Yeah.
And we try and mentor where people want to be, where people need mentors. And we also, the other thing that we do is that we connect people. So if I knew that you were working on project A and someone else down the country is working in similar things, we would get you guys connected.
Right. I mean, I keep going back to Alimetry. Sorry, it's like
That's okay.
I think it's so cool. But
they're one of my favorite companies too.
There you go.
Okay, all 11 are my favorite.
Fangirl
Yeah.
over Alimetry for a bit.
Yes.
But Professor Greg O'Grady collaborated with Armin Garabands over in San Francisco, I think that was. You know, they were working on
I think it's
contemporaneous
Stanford, right?
thing. Okay, yeah. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense if there's two people doing more or less the same thing or building on something that they could build on together. Why would you reinvent the wheel?
I mean, I was just going to say, one of the other things that we try and do to connect the whole system, I mean, building the ecosystem is a really important key part of this. And you need to make connections that are meaningful. So we try and build a trusted network amongst what we do. The other thing is that to basically look at coming into our funding, our funding translator, you actually need to work with at least 2 organizations. So, and you have to have a clinician as part of your research team. And you also need to have someone that has got commercialization expertise. So you're trying to build the germ, or you're trying to put together the germ of a successful MedTech company right from the beginning. Yeah. And that's the three parts of the...
Because an idea is no good if a clinician, we're in medicine, doesn't want to use it. And an idea is also no good if it's not commercially viable.
Yeah.
Who's going to pay for it? How are we going to get there? You know, what's the pathway from idea to actual product in someone's hands? Yeah. Yeah.
And also, I mean, like, commercially viable can actually pull a lot of triggers in different people. So, commercially viable to me just means economically sustainable. So you can actually build another fission particle. You can build a Medtronic if you wish, or you could actually be a non-profit. But regardless of what you do in each of those stages, it is the fact that money goes round, right? You're sustaining the product, you're getting it out there, you're protecting it, this custodianship of it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just stays on the shelf.
Definitely. Is that model of having very early expertise or expert knowledge and assessment of these ideas, is that quite unique? Because it almost feels like when you hear of high-profile cases in the medical device industry or just the medical industry where like just money gets thrown at it and there seems to be no real benchmarking or testing or stress testing the idea, and then after a few $1 million, of course that didn't work. I mean, not pointing fingers, but obviously Theranos is the one that probably everyone can understand. But I mean, it seems logical, but I feel is that not unique but fairly uncommon?
I think that it's it's probably not uncommon, put it this way, but I think that in New Zealand we have only so much money. And so do you waste that money, or do you actually support the projects that actually have legs?
Yes.
So you have to consider that, right?
Yeah. So it's out of necessity, but it produces quality at the other end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and as I said earlier, quality for New Zealand is really important, because we don't, in Silicon Valley, you'll have like 100 ideas within a month. We might have 2.
Yeah.
So how do you actually protect the 2 that is really good?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So you mentioned momentum. Where do you see the industry in another 5 years' time? I mean, it sounds like you're very confident that those things that are pivoting and the ones that are expanding are going to be successful. What is coming through now that in 5 years' time you're super excited about?
There's a couple of projects that are that is actually, if you like, addressing community health. So maybe I'll just rephrase that. Addressing healthcare in the community. And it's not necessarily a project that has been funded out of our MedTech translator, but it is in the system and within the partners that we know. So this is actually a piece of work by Whanau Tahi and Seki Health. They've developed a platform, if you like, where you actually have the toolkit that's needed in the community for them to screen, diagnose, and actually have a proper telehealth conversation with their provider. Now, I think that's where things are moving, definitely. But it's also very interesting to see the Maori community just picking it up and running with it. So I'm actually waiting for that platform to be available.
It's very exciting, isn't it? Because one of the things, we can talk about health inequality, inequity, access, that kind of stuff, and it's all well and good if you have these fancy healthcare interventions or frameworks, but if they don't get out of the main centres into the community, it's just kind of just adding to the pile of things that drive inequity, right? So some of these digital health initiatives, ones that are usable, easily adopted, have the ability to translate some of those fantastic developments in healthcare to the wider community outside of the main centres as well.
There's also, I was going to say that the other thing is the cost of technology, right? There's a group out at University of Canterbury led by Jake Campbell and Grace Walker. They're looking at a non-invasive glucose sensor and they've designed it to be extremely affordable as well, working with the Maori community to design this. Now, if the technology is developed and actually is distributed, it's not just in New Zealand. It's actually going to be really useful across the world in developing countries. Not everyone has got the deep pockets for healthcare like the US market. Seriously, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. Anything else that's coming through? Okay, so maybe I can rephrase that. So the last 7 years, you've had a bunch of different projects on the go. Are there any projects for the future? Any other gaps that you can see in the wider industry that CMDT and all your other projects can fill the niche?
Well, if you're talking about projects that will grow into companies, yes, there's several, but they're probably not ones that I can talk about right now. But I would say watch out. Watch the space for Swallowing Technologies. So Swallowing Technologies is led by Maggie Lee Huckabee from University of Canterbury. And she's a speech therapist as well. And she's developed a technology for dysphagia. So dysphagia is a little bit like going back to Junofam with their pelvic floor health. You actually don't know where your pelvic floor muscles are. It's the same as swallowing. You actually don't know which muscles you're actually activating when you swallow because it's a reflex action. And when people have got dysphagia, which means that they've got difficulty swallowing for one reason or the other, they have to retrain so that they can actually eat. And she's developed a technology that can actually visualize your swallowing muscles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So have a look at that.
Yeah.
So I'm Maggie Lee is just at I'd say the start of Swallowing Technologies commercialization journey. So just watch out for that space.
Absolutely. I might see if she's interested in having a chat as well.
Yes, I'm sure she would. She's lovely.
Good to know. Okay, so how does so you're also on the Return on Science committee, for Uniservices. So that is obviously all part of this wider ecosystem.
That's right. Yeah.
So, what got you interested in being a part of that committee? So,
well, to be fair, I guess Will Charles, who runs who's the director of investment at Uniservices, he's extended an invitation, and from my point, it's just another part of my whole perspective of the ecosystem. So I wanted to see how other things were done in other parts of the chain, if you like, and the projects that were coming through, and it was really good to see the projects that we funded at the early stage coming out, and presenting at Return on Science. And actually contributing to that conversation. Yeah. But that I'd say that the assessment panel, it's got really wise heads around it. So, you're learning from them, and then you're taking it back into the early stage community.
Yeah.
So that's amazing, right?
Yeah. I mean,
how else will you learn?
Definitely. Again, if you can't see it, you won't try. But if there aren't people to provide feedback, aren't people to provide expertise and maybe say, hey, you're barking up the wrong tree over here, or actually go with it. This is awesome.
And also look at processes, right? Yeah, because that's how you learn.
Yeah. And do you think we're at the point of reaching a critical mass with the medtech industry? Are there enough people? Maybe taking a step back. I mean, I'm always railing on the fact that brain drain is a real thing in this country. Sadly, it's true. I think I probably sound like a broken record to the people that have listened to more than one episode. But I mean, my role outside of this podcast, my employment has moved further and further away from New Zealand just by virtue of where the opportunities are, where the career progression is, where the money is. I mean, you've got to pay for your family to survive. Plot twist. But we need to have a way for people to take their really valuable educations and stay here, rather than get educated. Education is expensive, and then let's go to Australia, which is really easy now because the pathway to citizenship is a cinch, and great agreement, right? But between the two countries. But I mean, unless people stay here, there's going to be a constant siphoning off of expertise in the next generation, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And so, I guess what drives me in this space at this point is, selfishly, I want my kids to have a good future. I want them to be able to stay here. Because I like my grandchildren, to play with next, without having to travel 3 hours across the Tasman. But
that's not including delays, by the way.
Yeah, that's true.
Found that out a lot recently.
But the medtech sector, to me, it's a sector where many things come together. There is the health, the ability to support and help people with healthcare. There is that social aspect of better education, better jobs, etc. And then there's the commercial, the commercial side of things as well, which is really important. Now, and that to me is actually an economic playbook, because if you can grow the economy for New Zealand, then a brain drain won't be happening. But the other thing is, if you can have excellence in areas in New Zealand, instead of a brain drain, you get a reverse brain drain, because people will come. And if you and in the ecosystem right now, you do have overseas people in the medtech field that are here, and these are not these are people who've been there, done that. They've had some experience, and they've just decided to settle into New Zealand. Probably the fact that they probably don't need to struggle to buy a house, for example, that helps. But the thing is, they're here, and so that we just need to make those connections. The one thing that I think is missing in New Zealand for the medtech sector is that everything we've done has been virtual. So there's not one place that you can go to and say, that's where the CMDT lives, that's where this lives, or that's where that lives. It's kind of distributed, and you need to kind of know to get there. So what the latest biggest project that we're working on right now is the development of our National Innovation Hub called MedTech IQ Aotearoa. And that's really and that's focused on medical devices and digital health technologies. And the idea around MedTech IQ Aotearoa is that it pulls together everything that we do and make it really visible to ourselves as well as globally. And we will have hubs in Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, and Dunedin, where it's all connected as a backbone, where people can come together locally, and then you can say, that's Auckland, they do that. In Wellington, they do that, but we all work together. And each of the hubs, respecting the expertise in the various regions, we're looking at each of the hubs developing their own area of expertise and interests so that they can actually share it in the national conversation.
Yeah.
So you're not replicating.
Yes.
So that's the latest venture, which is very exciting.
Absolutely. I mean, you raise a good point, because I think we probably discovered throughout COVID, when we were all billeted to our houses and living very virtually, that it's all well and good, it's all very convenient, but fundamentally we're not virtual beings. We're biological beings that need to see, touch, smell, hear, things. I mean, it's all built into what got us here in the first place. So having, a physical place where people are collaborating, learning from each other, building that expertise is going to be immensely valuable, no doubt.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
I mean, part of it is really, to spark new ideas. You need the people to actually have the corridor conversations, to sit down and have a cup of coffee together, and just chat.
Definitely. I said to one of my guests, I spent 3 years at home during COVID. It was great for my daughter because she grew up for 3 years seeing me every single day. I'm not so sure that my wife enjoyed me being at home all the time, but that's another conversation. But at the end of the 3 years, you kind of go, oh man, I'm struggling to, put a few good sentences together and make eye contact, because you're not doing it as much, and you're not having those interesting conversations, and you're not getting inspired by, the back of your brain working as you're driving into work, or having those water cooler conversations, or, just having a chit chat and getting inspired by other people. I mean, that is fundamentally a human experience, and to take that away long term, not great.
No, it's not, because the virtual world is not spontaneous, and good ideas actually come from, as you say, having to rub against each other and actually, have different perspectives.
Yeah,
of
bit
life.
of friction, bit of intellectual friction, to build capacity.
Yeah,
really.
so hopefully what MedTech IQ Aotearoa will do is to put us on the global stage and actually, hey, investors out there, multinationals out there who are open for business, do come and play.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So, I mean, you want to be able to attract foreign capital to here, and maybe bring some, in-source ideas from outside the company, country, not just within the country. But surely the end goal for a lot of these companies is to eventually, if you want to be on the global stage, you probably can't exclusively stay in New Zealand. I mean, we are quite far away, right? Do they need to? Is there a point where they'll spread their wings and go off to another part of the world?
I think that, companies do. You can't stop companies from leaving. And in the MedTech space, you're actually born global from day one, meaning that, think about it, right?
I mean, you're not just servicing your local community as a tradesman.
You're not servicing just your local, you're not just servicing New Zealand. Our market is too small, right? What we can do is that we can support our market, but we need to look global right from day one. So that's one thing. But if you look at Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, hey, they're a big multinational. They're New Zealand's largest medtech company. Where are they? They're still here, right? The research is here. Their main headquarters is here, and they're building a second campus, right? And they do have many campuses in Mexico, and I think there's one in Mexico for sure. I can't remember whether there's one in Thailand at the moment, but in any case, those you do need to have outposts all over the world where you sell, where you distribute, etc., manufacture. But you can still keep your main operations here. And I think for New Zealand companies, as they grow and scale, if that's the vision that the founders have, I think that's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not many founders. I think when you talk to the various founders, you won't find any that's kind of like, yep, I'm just packing my bags and leaving.
No, I think because with an entrepreneurial spirit, I think maybe is quite closely correlated with a little bit of patriotism. If that's maybe that's not the right word to use, but you know what I mean. Like, if you want to push the boundaries, I think you also want to bring some of the benefit. You keep some of the benefit from the place that raised you and gave the initial opportunities. It'd be a little bit selfish to be like, I'm going to do this all myself and take it away from you.
Well, I think that the companies that have come out of the universities, for example, a lot of the research that's been commercialized actually comes from a research group that, the founder would have belonged to at some point in time. And they would always, and if you look at some of them, that relationship is still there. So while you're commercializing one part of your pipeline, there's another one being built here. It's like, hey, there's some more coming through. So why would you leave your pipeline to some extent?
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
These are where this is your bank of ideas, and they're really good ones too, right?
Yeah.
So that relationship, I think, is really important. And I think talking to a lot of the founders that I know, part of it is, the research group is here. The family's here. That's the other thing. And New Zealand is still a good place to raise kids.
Yeah.
We're still relatively pretty good.
Yes.
Even though we've got heaps of issues around crime at the moment.
Definitely. But it's not as though like we're isolated in that regard, right? I mean, the reopening post-COVID and all the changes that have happened is we're not alone.
Yeah. We're not alone. So
do you think are so you kind of alluded to it earlier, but what are the main gaps in the industry right now? So MedTech IQ, that's going to solve it by bringing it into a physical representation, 4 hubs, largely not specialized, but doing not overlapping. So we're not going to go from 10 silos to 4 silos, because that would be
connected and a little bit overlapping, but clear expertise areas where if you're building some infrastructure, then you don't actually have to replicate it in the other 3 regions, for example.
What are other things that we're missing? Do we need more people well-educated, science degrees, engineering degrees, that kind of thing, to support, new ideas, people working for companies that have spun up from these big ideas?
Yeah, we
is
certainly
it human
do.
capital? Is it actual financial capital?
I think we need both, actually. So the financial capital is always important. So, there is only so much money in New Zealand. And so with MedTech IQ Aotearoa, that's a way of actually trying to bring new investment into New Zealand. The human capital is really important. And part of that is trying to get more people into STEM, including Maori and Pacifica. And the other thing is that actually upskilling people around the needs and I guess the quirks of the MedTech sector. The research translation journey for a MedTech expert specialist is quite different. Because you've got you have to understand the regulatory side of things. You have to understand health economics. You have to understand how you actually design your clinical trials. And on top of that, you probably need a network. You need to be able to pitch. You need to be able to do a whole lot of different things. So entrepreneurism is really important too.
So there's a couple programs out of the University of Auckland, right? There's the Master of Bioscience Enterprise. So that's kind of crossing between, science degree into the commercialization side of things. Are there other comparable programs? Or is it less of a formal education and more just
organic growth?
Yeah, getting exposure to it.
I think it's both, right? Because I think so for example, just the Masters in Bioscience Enterprise program. So the young people that are coming out of it, as you said, there's a cross between a technology-based undergraduate degree and then moving into the commercialization side of things. But the key here is that these guys have got something really special to offer, but they need projects to work on. And then if you think about what our research community does, they're really good at research, but they're actually not really liking to write business cases, for example. So we've actually tried to bridge the two, where we've taken the Bioscience Enterprise master students and brought them into our community. And we get them to work with all the different groups to help with early stage market validation and looking at business cases, etc. So that way, you're actually growing the expertise of both sides of the the commercial side as well as the research side.
Yeah.
And now we're bringing in the younger clinicians as well so that they have an appreciation of technology because it's going to be important for their future. But at the same time, they're also exposed to entrepreneurism and commercialization. Yeah. So the gap is really building almost holistic people. I think that the programs that are around out of all our various universities in terms of entrepreneurism and like this Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the university and the other universities, I think that's really important. But in terms of MedTech, there's, like you said, there's some nuances, and that's where perhaps if you are able to provide, at the moment we're providing I wouldn't say a formal program, but we've got workshops that people can come in and dip in and out. But a lot of it is actually working in as interns in companies and actually learning on the bench, so to speak, and actually understanding whether you even want to be in the space.
Yeah, definitely. I did a Master of Bioscience Enterprise many, many moons ago, and I wish there was something like what you have created around the time that I graduated, because I had this fancy education. So glad I did it, but there wasn't an immediate place for me to go because the industry wasn't quite as big as it is now. There wasn't a logical progression. Obviously, that the whole, it's all part of the wider framework that has been building for the past 15 years, including the work that you're doing, obviously. So it's great to see that there is that logical progression. You do a science degree, for example. I don't particularly want to be a benchtop science. Maybe I'll do a master's. Okay, give that a go. Or do a postgraduate diploma. Figure out, the commercial side's interesting, but I do like a little bit of the technology side or the research side. Put the two together, and there's a logical progression. Fantastic. Because I know a lot of people in my cohort up and left. They just took their fancy educations that cost a bunch and, went elsewhere. So it's great that now there is a bit more of a logical progression for these people that have great education, want to do something more entrepreneurial, and there's the framework there and the ecosystem there. It's awesome.
It's a long-term play. So I'll show my age now. So I had that fancy education in science and research and academic research, and at some point I kind of realized that there's more to the world I need to explore. And that was when I was just about to finish my postdoc at the university. That was like, I can't stand another 3 years of postdocing. But the other thing too is I found myself to be a very impatient scientist. I couldn't wait for the really long-term results. I just wanted to see what I was doing, taking fruit right from the beginning. And that was when I joined industrial research and had a stint as a in a consultancy world there. And then fell into the MedTech space, and lo and behold, I'm kind of like in this space now where I'm doing things that are really long term, where you can, but it doesn't feel it. Right. And I think it's just I've fallen into this really cool space where I've always had an interest in health and healthcare, business, and science. And so it doesn't matter now that it's long term, but in fact it has to be long term if you really want to see the results.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the 10-year time horizons for a lot of medical technologies. Yeah. They're very different to other industries.
Exactly.
But you like how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Yeah. So
it's like, how do you build an ecosystem?
Yeah.
Not overnight.
No, exactly. Excellent. All right. Well, where can people go to find out a bit more about yourself and what you're doing and MedTech IQ and what's happening in the wider MedTech space?
Well, a couple of places. Find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place, and message me. You can see a little bit more about what we do on our website, www.cmdt.org.nz, and that will actually give you a history of what we do and the programs that we run. And just feel free to reach out and contact me if you're interested in the MedTech space.
Awesome. Well, it's so good to have people like you that are really passionate about the here and now, but also the future, and building high capacity and high value industries for the long term. Fully and behind the idea of I want New Zealand to be a great place for my child and my future offspring. But yeah, super inspiring. Thank you so much for your time, and all the best.
Thank you. Just make sure that your offsprings are in the MedTech space in the future.
I'll do my best. But I've got an uphill battle because my family is very artsy, and I'm carrying the flag for science.